This last week, Amazon released the first few episodes for season 2 of the Lord of the Rings series, The Rings of Power. And already some people are starting to notice a pattern with it that suggests that viewership is already dropping off. Now, I'm not going to say definitively one way or the other whether they're losing or not losing viewers, because it's really too early to tell at this point. The show hasn't even been out a week. Amazon hasn't released any figures on it. We don't have any third-party data to go off of. But I do think there is some merit to what they're bringing up in this article from that Park Place, because it does kind of mirror what we saw when it came to season 1 of The Rings of Power, and it was later confirmed that season actually did lose viewership over time. The headline from this article right here: The Lord of the Rings of Power season 2 seemingly losing viewers already. Now, jumping down to the article, this is kind of where they're basing this argument off of. The number of IMDb reviews for the first episode of season 2 and the third episode decreased by over 50%. There are over 3,800 reviews for the first episode, 11 Kings Under the Sky. The second episode only has over 2,200 reviews, and the third episode has just 1,800 reviews. Between the first and second episode, the number of reviews declined by 42%. Between the first and third, it's a 52% decline. So what they're saying there is they saw a number of reviews dropping off between the first and third episode. So they're trying to equate that to say viewership is dropping off, and that's why there's fewer people actually giving it reviews. Now, that's a little bit of a stretch. I don't think it's entirely meritless though, because it does kind of indicate if you actually had, like, let's say more people giving it reviews for the third episode compared to the first one, then I think that would suggest that there's actually an increase in viewership. But saying it's a decline, I don't think that in and of itself means that viewers are dropping off. But like I said, it could indicate that there is a decline in viewership. The second season appears to be following the same trend as the first season. Kim Masters at The Hollywood Reporter shared back in April 2023 that 63% of the people who watched part of the first season did not finish it. She wrote, while Amazon, like other streamers, provide only limited data, and internally it held information even more closely than usual on the series, sources confirmed that The Rings of Power had a 37% domestic completion rate, customers who watched the entire series. She did say, however, that overseas it did a little bit better with a 45% completion rate, but according to insiders, they were hoping that a 50% completion rate at a minimum, and that would have been considered okay. But you also have to keep in mind, for a series like this, that's the most expensive series to produce of all time, Amazon doesn't want to spend that kind of money just to do okay. They want to actually make money back. It's like some people saying if a movie makes its budget back at the theaters, then it was a success. And it's like, well, I mean, it's not bad, but you don't want to just kind of end up where you started off with. If you're going to spend that much money and invest that much money, you want to actually make something in return. Just not losing isn't necessarily considered success, but I guess it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world either. While not a one-to-one reflection to Masters' numbers, the number of IMDb reviews for the first season declined by nearly 50% from the first episode to the 8th episode. As of writing, the first episode has over 54,000 reviews, while the 8th episode has just over 28,000. That's a decline by 48%. So they're basically saying you're going to see a steeper decline on IMDb than you will see in actual viewership numbers. So it's not a really a one-to-one comparison until you have that third-party data to kind of go off of. You don't know for sure whether season 2 is losing viewers, but there is that correlation to be had with it too. And just for curiosity, I decided to kind of check how this was compared to some other popular Amazon Prime series, just to see how those actually measure up, because this article is suggesting, because you're seeing that decline in viewership between the first episode and the third episode, then that's kind of an indicator that viewership is declining. But look at another popular series that came out for Amazon, like Reacher, for instance. I have that here on IMDb, and you can see for the first episode, 7.6K people reviewed it, 6.2 for the second episode, 5.8 for the third episode, and it kind of held along those lines: 5.8, 5.6, 5.4, 5.3, and then it picked up again, and then the last episode it was 6.1. And then also, out of curiosity, I checked Fallout, because that was a series that did really well for Amazon, and look at the ratings or the number of reviews right here: 15 for the first episode, 12 for the second, 11 for the third. So you're seeing that decline right there, similar to what we saw with Rings of Power, but it kind of holds along that line: 11, 11, 10, 10, 9.7. Then the last episode, it's 15K, which is the same as the first episode. So I think it is safe to say if it ends kind of along the same lines, or if it has a pretty flat hold throughout the whole season, then that suggests that viewership is pretty good for it. And we saw that when it came to Fallout, and that's why that show was such a huge success. We saw that with Reacher. That's why that show was a success. Rings of Power season 1, they mentioned in the article, from the first episode 54,000 to the last episode 29,000. That was a steep decline, but something that was kind of interesting is the 6th episode, when they had that major battle, that was actually 8.2, so the highest rated episode of the season. We saw a slight uptick because the first episode 54, then 49, 37, 31, 27, and then it had a little uptick right here, 36, and then it went back down again to 25. So this kind of bucked the trend a little bit. It seemed like it almost climaxed with this episode, and then it just kind of limped to a finish line with these last 2 episodes. Yeah, there was a slight increase right here, but this has kind of a strange pattern when compared to some of the other series that were considered a success. And you also see a steeper decline in the amount of people reviewing it compared to the shows that were successful, like Fallout and Reacher. So maybe there is some merit to be had when they're saying like, oh, there's that steep viewership decline in the first few episodes of Rings of Power season 2, because maybe that is an indicator that there's fewer people watching it. Going back to the article, it talks about some of the Nielsen numbers for it, because even though Nielsen might not necessarily have the actual data that Amazon has, because there's no way of knowing how many people are watching it, because Amazon tries to keep that information secretive. Nielsen does have a consistent methodology in how they measure viewership data for things. So if they're, according to their metrics, you're seeing a decline in viewerships, then even though you don't necessarily have the exact viewership numbers or amount of people watching it, you do have a pretty good idea that viewership is either increasing or decreasing. And to me, that's what Nielsen and a lot of these other third-party sites are best for, is just seeing if the kind of the pattern, if people are actually, more people are tuning in or more people are tuning out. As noted by X user, now it's known, according to Nielsen, the show garnered 1.253 billion minutes watched during its 2-episode premiere back in 2022. And this is Rings of Power season 1. In its second week, the number declined to 1.203 billion. It fell even further with the release of its 4th episode to 988 million minutes. It continued to decline in the 4th week to 966 million minutes. And this kind of tracks along with what we saw with the number of viewers or number of people actually reviewing it on IMDb. So like I was saying, the IMDb chart right here is just kind of like a more extreme version of what the actual viewership figures are. Not necessarily precise, but you can kind of see the pattern where people are either tuning in or tuning out. So when they're saying that there's a viewership decline with Rings of Power season 2, I believe there could be some legitimacy to that. It might not be, or probably not as extreme as what they're suggesting by saying it has a 52% decline between the first episode to the 3rd one. But I do think there is somewhat of a decline, and I think Amazon is just hoping that they'll either recover or it'll hold pretty consistently and actually get over that 50% completion rate from the first episode to the season finale, something that they couldn't do with Rings of Power season 1. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Do you think people are tuning out from this and they just don't care? Or do you think this is actually going to do better than what Rings of Power season 1 did? Comment below, and if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share the video out there, because it helps out with the channel. Thank you.